Hey, I'm Rich.
And I'm Nancy.
And we are the DPT Duo. You can find us on Instagram at the DPT Duo.
On Instagram, we share a lot more tips on a weekly basis, just sharing a little bit of our experience as DPT students and sort of how we navigate that journey.
Yeah, and today we wanted to talk about how to choose a DPT program.
Definitely today we're just sort of setting a little bit of framework. It's not something that's completely thorough. It's just kind of some things that you should consider when it comes to looking for a program and things that might be of importance to you.
Yeah, so today we wanted to talk about starting with an outline of things that you might feel is important to you when looking at a program. You do not have to set it in stone or anything like that. It's just to start giving you an idea of what to look at when you start researching schools. So the first thing we wanted to say is start with an outline. These are things that you think that are important to you when looking at a DPT program, whatever that characteristic might be. It's just to give you a starting place for when you do start your research schools, just so you give yourself an idea of where to start. And the good thing about the outline is it's just very simple. It's very just like a checklist, and you can always modify it as you need.
So first off, we do suggest that you go to PTCast to begin your search. This is the universal application that most schools use. So that's PTCast, ptcas.org. So we'll put that up for you guys. The reason that that's a good place to go to is just because it does have a lot of programs listed on there that use the application, as well as programs that don't participate with the application. So it's a nice way to just see what programs are available to you guys. Now, specific circumstances may dictate whether or not you have to stay in a certain location, but we do want you guys to keep an open mind when it comes to location. However, we are going to start off with that as one of the first things that you kind of want to look at, just because PTCast does organize them by state. So it just seems a little bit more of an easier way than going in alphabetical order, which is the only other way that they organize those programs. So it's just a good way to start, but definitely keep an open mind about where you go. So when you first start researching a place, you want to start at your state, and then kind of go from surrounding states there and just see what's available closest to your location. As you go down that list, then you can kind of start to see what specifics are available in each program. And when you find things that are important to you that you can write down in your outline, or that you already have in your outline, then that's kind of when it's a good idea to start looking at things that are maybe a little bit further away if you're more open to it, as well as finding out what things are important to you as well.
Yeah, so basically looking at your programs, the programs in your state and the surrounding states, it just is giving you more ideas to figure out what is important to you. And then that makes it easier to start searching all the other schools that may be in states that are a bit further away, especially if they're a lot further away.
So in the description below, we did write a list of things that you might want to start your outline with. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to apply to every single one of you, but you can pick and choose a few of the things that we might give you. Maybe we're giving you a little bit of an idea of where to start with that. Yeah, and then as you keep going, just start adjusting your list to whatever you feel you need, and all that information that you've gathered from various programs, and go from there.
Yeah, so now we're just going to talk about some of the main topics that we think you should focus on and that we need to elaborate on just a little bit, and we're going to start with admission requirements.
So most programs have a similar build, and they have similar prerequisites. This makes it really easy to apply to multiple programs. So if you're early on in your curriculum, it's going to be a little bit easier for you to fit those classes in your curriculum as you go through your undergrad, versus if you are planning to apply sometime soon, then that's kind of why I feel admissions requirements are an important thing to look at, because you got to see what schools you're eligible for. With that being said, if you do take a gap year, that's always a good time to also add a few extra classes, because that could also open you up to a lot more schools. So as we said before, it's all individual, so it just depends where you're at in your PT journey here. Definitely not something you have to stick with. So if you are going to apply soon and perhaps you don't get in, hopefully you do, then at that point you can kind of start to look at it more as a person that's about to take a gap year and see what schools might be out there that you might want to add classes for. So these are really key factors in finding ways to bring your GPA up. Maybe schools that require extra courses, or schools that will substitute a few of your courses out. Most of the time that's going to be things like exercise physiology versus human physiology. They'll let you swap those out. But you have to really read through the requirements for each program to make sure that that's something that's available to you if you did better in one versus the other.
So the next thing we want to get into is location. Okay, how much does location matter to you? And this obviously is going to vary for several reasons. It could be that you are a caregiver to somebody. It could be that whatever the reason is, could be pretty much any reason. We do suggest being open-minded. Of course, that's our experience, is we went really far from home, from California to North Carolina, but that may not be the right thing for you. But just being open about it is going to give you a lot more opportunities for a school that's right for you, and just give you a lot more opportunities and life experience in general. So that's good. And the things that you need to consider though with location is if the school has in-state and out-of-state tuition, particularly for their grad programs. Sometimes that's not the case. Every program is different. If it's a private school, they usually don't have in-state, out-of-state, or just cost of living you have to consider. And we'll get a little bit into that as well.
So for us, cost of living was a big thing. We're both originally from California, so a lot of the programs that we were interested in had maybe lower tuition rates, but the cost of living in the areas were a lot higher. So when we moved out here, it wasn't that much. Honestly, that it's about equaled out. It's not that much of a difference. We're still paying higher education costs because we're both in private schools, but our cost of living is a little bit lower than it would be in, say, San Francisco. Now for tuition, you want to start to look at that once you're starting to compare schools that are very similar that you might want to take a look at. So at this point, what we want to suggest is making sure that you're looking at comparing combined total cost of education. So that's your tuition, that's cost of living, as well as whether or not there's available scholarships that are in the program. There's a lot of scholarships out there, which is great. However, I personally looked for a school that had scholarships built within the program, because then I'm competing against a smaller pool of applicants, which means that I have a higher chance of obtaining one of these scholarships. It's not something that might be important to you, but it was definitely something I was looking for.
So the next thing we want to talk about is the admission process for the schools you're considering. This really has to do with what we felt was important, was does the school have an interview? Not all schools do. In fact, more and more seem to be doing away with that. But how are they looking at applicants? Okay, so every school is different, or could be very different, I should say. For example, one school I was previously interested in only looked at GPA and GRE. They can care less about letters of rec, hours, experience, nothing. Those things, they rank you, they start from the top down until they have their class. Schools like Campbell or Duke, they take a lot more look at the whole person. They look at all of your letters of rec, all your hours, all your experiences. They see how you do in the interview, all these things. So, and then that's like the exact opposite. And then you have schools that are in between. They might not have an interview, but they ask you a lot in the supplemental application. Not all schools have it, but sometimes they do. They ask a lot of different questions in the supplemental application as a replacement for having an interview. That way they get a better feel for you, your personality, and how you contribute to the program. So
right now, obviously there's pandemic going on, so that'll date this video if you're watching it in the future, but I think that's really going to change. So it might mean that some schools don't do the interview and start just adding more supplemental questions. It could mean that they do still do the interview, but that now it's over Zoom, so it does change a lot of those dynamics. We are adding interview skills, and they're not always applicable with these things, but we're also monitoring that situation and seeing how that's going to change. However, with the interview process, it's also just how thorough is their process in finding those candidates. And schools change sometimes. So Duke didn't have an interview just a couple years ago, I think 2 or 3, versus like now they brought it back since then. So And there's a lot of really great programs that had interviews and now they're not offering it, just because they find just as good of candidates with just an added amount of supplemental questions in the application.
Yeah, and the last part of this suggestion is rolling admission. From both of our experiences and a lot of people we talk to, if they have rolling admission, you got to get your application basically as soon as it opens or as quickly after it opens as you can. So what rolling admission means is if the application opens, whenever they get an application, they review it and they decide if they want to interview or not, or if they don't have an interview, if they want to accept you or not, and then they start filling slots right away. So then they could fill up. By the time you even apply, they may already have a full class, and that shouldn't deter you necessarily from applying there if that's what you need. But because sometimes people will drop and you can fill a slot if you're up there. But generally speaking, you're going to want to get it in as soon as you can. If it's not a rolling admission school, that means they have a set date, the application opens, they wait the whole time, and whatever applications get in that time frame, then they start looking at everybody and rank everybody compared to each other, and then go from there. And that gives you a little bit more time to get your application in. But every school is different, so you have to make sure you know what those schools you're looking at are doing.
Every program is unique to itself. A lot of the curriculum might be similar. However, because they're all trying to build you for what the NPTE, right? We're all taking the same national test, and we all want to get licensed. So at that point, you want to start looking more so at, do they focus on something specific? Do they offer something that maybe is interesting to you, or how well-rounded the opportunities feel? Now, some schools might focus a little bit more on research, others in more clinical skills, and some are really well-rounded and they'll do both. And things that might intrigue you is perhaps if they have some type of special lab, a special lab in their facility, as well as maybe pro bono clinics or community services within the community that they're around.
Yeah, and also there's just other types of thing that may interest you. I know at Campbell we really focused on underserved rural communities, and both of us growing up in rural communities, we actually saw a lot of those struggles. And so we feel inclined to be able to figure out how we can serve those communities better. But there's a ton of quote unquote X factors or just other things that a program might have. I know like High Point, they work a lot with Adidas, or that school has just something special about them that you may want to consider. It's not like the hugest thing, but it could be a factor that makes you swing your decision on whether to apply to that school or not.
So other things to consider are student life and experiences. You really want to get to know the area that you're going to. So we definitely recommend visiting the campus, attending an information session, or getting a formal tour of the facility. Now, schools are trying to sell to you. They want you to spend your thousands of dollars of loans at their facility. So keep that in mind when you are going to these tours or visiting the campus, that you need to look at it objectively as well. Is this going to work for me? If the facilities are nice, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good education system. If it's a really good education system, you might also want to see if they're updating anything to add on once you enter their program. Now you're also wanting to check out what types of professors are available, any research opportunities, what types of contracts, or how they find their CIs for your clinical rotations. It's really all individual, but what things are important to you when you go to a place. You don't want to end up in the middle of nowhere if you really like to have more of a city type of life, right? Or if that sort of thing is more important to you. If you want to Target down the street, you might not want to be in in the boonies, but it's all up to you. But definitely something that you want to consider when you're trying to see if that's where you see yourself at.
Yeah, and similarly, we suggest that you network. Networking is important. So there's two things that we want to talk about. First off is when you're researching schools, like a lot of pre-PT students, a lot of DPT students or new grads are on Instagram and similar like Facebook and Twitter that you can reach out to and just ask like, hey, how is your experience at this program, in the city, in the area, in the state, whatever it is. That way you get some like real anecdotes about their experiences, and then you can kind of make a different type of judgment than just researching the city itself and just trying to make your own assumptions about it. They can actually give you like real concrete like experiences. And then also considering programs, you want to look at their alumni network. Now my program is a little bit newer. Like we haven't had that many DPT classes graduate yet, but the other programs at the school have a really good foundation or a really good alumni network. And then with my program, even though it is new, they're trying to set the foundation to be able to build this very steadily over time, a really strong network, and not just let people get away and just kind of like quote unquote cut ties with the school. And then for Nancy, going to Duke obviously has a lot of notoriety, has a lot of strong networking built into it. So that's obviously going to be very good. And every program is going to be a little bit different. Obviously newer programs might be a little tougher. Older programs might just not have a good network. It's just something that I would probably consider, if not as like the top priority at all, but like it could be a deciding factor. Or if you get into two different schools and one has a really strong network and one doesn't, and they're otherwise equal, then obviously you can make your decision on that.
And with reaching out to students, you're always going to get their own personal experience, which is nice. But when you're going through choosing these programs, or going through maybe you're early on, right? Or you have a year or two before you apply, or sometime, just make sure that you're always open to new programs that you hear about, changes in what seemed to be important for you at the beginning and now isn't. So as you continue to kind of experience this PT world, always be open to those situations. So we're both originally from Fresno, California. That program has a really great pro bono clinic. One of the things that they do is an MSK clinic in the students' health center. So they're able to treat students as clinicians and learn a lot there, as well as opportunities to treat patients in their GBMC. So that's a gait balanced mobility clinic. I've been in both of those, are really great. Samuel Merritt has a really great program with their community that really emphasize giving back to the community and having services available to a lot of the school systems within their surrounding area. And then Duke itself interested me a lot because of the team-based learning that they have. I really like collaboration, so for me to be able to work within a smaller team and share ideas, that's 100% something that called out to me. So that's part of why I was interested in going to that program originally. I don't know if you have anything to add about Campbell, something that called you to it.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, the rural-based focus was a thing that was important to me. They do have a pro bono clinic. Like Nancy mentioned, not every school is going to have that, just depending on what the resources they have and the location probably. Those things, a new facility never hurts when the program is otherwise already great. We got new facilities. They got new facilities at Duke. Hers is even newer than ours, and ours is like brand new. Things like that. She mentioned this earlier too. The faculty. It's not just, obviously every faculty is going to be a certain level of experienced and good, but there's levels to everything, and some faculty are really well networked. Some faculties may have a very specific specialty that you may be interested in, and if they end up being your advisor or you just have access to them, then that's going to be great. It's just all these little details that throughout all the things that we've already said that could make a big difference in how you perceive a school, and ultimately you want to go to the school that's most suited to you in all of these different aspects. And then that's why this is just an overview, because it can get so nuanced that you can kind of add to your outline and change it as you need.
For just, I don't know if it would be a disclaimer or not, but if you're not able to go to the school that you think would best suit your needs for whatever special circumstance you're in, or you just want to save money and stay at home and rent's free, I mean, that would have been great for me. But don't let that deter you either. Programs are meant to prepare you for the MPTE. So I've seen some really, really great people come out of very different programs, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's because they came out of that specific program, because could also be somebody who's just not as great that came out of the program. You're going to make it your own, and that means that you're going to seek out those opportunities for yourself, whether or not you're in a program that makes it really easy or a program that just doesn't have that set up yet. And you could even be the person that sets that up for somebody else later on, or gets that going for them. Now, to keep all of this information together, I would suggest doing an Excel sheet, because you can always add more categories, add little cells in between. And that's what's going to keep it all organized for you. I did originally try to write everything down from the schools, and it just became a really big mess. When looking at it, I thought it was really organized, but just use an Excel sheet. Believe me, you can always add, change, delete. It's way better. So yeah, again, we are the DPT duo. Follow us on Instagram. Subscribe if you want. We'll give you guys a notice whether or not we have videos. So